Beth Martin, curator of a New York museum, checks in with her team during one of the many huge events they throw. Stacey Harper, her assistant, radios in informing Beth that the staff are all resting at table 4. Approaching the table, a starved Beth yanks a plate of salad away from a male secretary, chomping down on it immediately while her coworkers toast her for another job well done. Suddenly, Stacey spots Brady Sachs, Beth's recent ex, at the event. Beth complains that it's not funny, considering how badly Brady dumped her. She doesn't believe he'd have the nerve to show up to her event after that. She claims she doesn't care about Brady and is long over their breakup in an attempt to appear unaffected, but when she looks up at her coworkers' faces, their expressions tell her Brady's been standing behind her this entire time. Sighing, Beth turns around to face him, wondering why he's here. Brady admits he has something he needs to tell Beth that he thinks will make up for how he dumped her a year ago in Applebee's. He starts explaining to Beth he was wrong when he dumped her, thinking then that she loved her work more than him, but he understands now, claiming he wants to jump in again in a big way. Beth starts getting her hopes up, only for Brady to clarify that he's met someone else that works just as hard as her, but now that he's been through what he has with Beth, he can finally understand and love this new woman, right? Brady's getting engaged, and Beth's coworkers, who have been listening in on the conversation as much as they can through headphones, mistakenly yell out that Beth's getting engaged, making the DJ stop the entire party and prematurely celebrate. Beth is forced to embarrass herself at her own event, popping the crowd's bubble and clarifying she won't be getting engaged, not to mention breaking a heel on top of it. Beth arrives home, exhausted from work, only to be visited by her baby sister, Joan, minutes after. Joan excitedly announces she's getting married. Joan met an Italian named Umberto on a flight to Italy 2 weeks ago, and now they're getting married in Rome. Beth thinks 2 weeks is far too soon to marry a person. It's not even long enough for a credit check. But Joan argues that she's not exactly in a place to give relationship advice. Beth can't deny that, admitting she loves her job and she'll know she's found the one when she loves him more than her work. Joan thinks she just wants a male version of herself, arguing that when you know, you don't need proof. Her sister just wants Beth to be happy for her, and while Beth claims she is, the next day at work, she confesses to Stacey she feels Joan is doomed. Stacey thinks she's lucky though, and she probably just got swept away, but Beth thinks she should focus on tangible things like work instead of getting swept away in a fairy tale, like she does. Beth's boss, Celeste, eyes her as she arrives at their meeting late. Upon her arrival, Celeste begins discussing their annual Board of Trustees, Gold Circle Gala, that Beth is in charge of running the special installation for. Celeste makes it clear she's weary of Beth's ability to pull the event off, and she's not reassured when Beth informs her the Slater Bradley piece, which is the centerpiece for the exhibition on pain, has yet to arrive due to insurance problems. Beth tries to assure her it will be sorted, and though it's an inopportune time, mentions to the group that she'll be in Rome for 2 days for her sister's wedding. Celeste is aghast, wondering how Beth could leave work when the gala is only weeks away. Beth promises Celeste she will be in contact and stay on top of the situation while in Rome, refusing to skip her sister's wedding. Celeste allows it but warns Beth that her talent doesn't make her irreplaceable. Beth struggles to get a cell signal in Rome as her taxi driver prattles on about how beautiful the city is, driving leisurely past the sights. He points out the Fontana d'Amore, a legendary fountain where people come from all over to toss a coin in and wish for love, but Beth's only concern is how late she is for Joan's wedding. Beth arrives at the wedding greeted by her mom, sister, and father. Joan introduces her to Umberto, who's more familiar than she's comfortable, and is ushered inside to meet his family and get dressed. Just before the ceremony starts, Umberto's best man bursts into the church, very late and causing a commotion when he drops his loudly ringing phone as he comes up the aisle. Beth eyes him curiously, wondering how come he has cell service here. The Italian wedding is a lively, raucous affair, and Beth plugs an ear as she strains to hear Stacey's update on the Slater Bradley situation over the phone. Her father interrupts her, pulling her aside to catch up, wondering what she thinks of Tina, his new pro volleyball player girlfriend. He confides he wishes she could feel what he does when he's with her, urging her to hurry up and get hitched already. Beth quips he'll get the wedding he wants soon enough, he's due for another wife soon anyways, but immediately rescinds her low blow. Her father can't help noting the ironic juxtaposition between them. Beth refuses to fall in love and he refuses to stop. He begs that whenever love finds her, she'll be open to it, and Beth agrees to try before they are interrupted by Joan, who summons her for the traditional smashing of the vase. The maid of honor is asked to smash a vase, and the amount of pieces it shatters into symbolizes the number of happy years she wishes for the couple. No pressure. Beth tries throwing the vase down, but it doesn't break at all on her first try. She picks up and tries hitting it against various objects and surfaces, failing each time and causing more and more collateral damage when she does. An old Italian lady thinks Beth wishes the couple a life of great suffering after she's knocked down by the vase, and Beth desperately tries to prove it's not so, hacking at the stubborn vase with a mic stand. The best man can't stand to look anymore, picking up the vase and throwing it against a wall, shattering it and saving Beth from further embarrassment. He introduces himself as Nick and the two share a brief witty back and forth before the crowd demands a speech. Beth tries giving a speech but is nervous since she doesn't speak Italian. Nick runs up to the podium, agreeing to translate for her though his Italian is rusty, requesting she doesn't say anything too complicated, but she does. Nick loses himself halfway through the translation, urging the crowd to just clap loudly so she'll wrap it up. But Beth is instead encouraged to continue thanks to the applause, and Nick ends up mistranslating something she says, making the audience quirk an eyebrow at Beth. Realizing he's run out of Italian, Beth wraps up the toast, wondering what was said afterwards as Umberto's brother hits on her, and his family seems to think she's a pervert. Nick comforts her, bringing her a drink as she wonders where he learned his bad Italian. Nick explains he and Umberto used to be roommates in Syracuse. He taught Nick Italian so he could pick up girls while Nick taught Umberto how to play American football. Beth questions who Nick's service provider is, admitting she has signal envy and trying to borrow his phone to send a work email. Nick cheekily flirts with her, insisting she's not allowed to touch his phone since she'd just take his number and make him a booty call anyways. Their playful bout is interrupted by Father Dino, who asks Nick for another round of Texas Hold'em tonight. Nick declines, admitting the father cleaned him out at Umberto's bachelor party the night before. Father Dino's only been a priest for 6 months and admittedly finds the transition difficult, asking God forgiveness. Nick and Beth look on at Joan and Umberto dancing, each trying to verify with the other that the person their loved one married is a good one. Nick claims Umberto's a saint while Beth admits Joan is an angel, but they're both in agreement that there's no way this marriage would last. They've known each other for 2 weeks. When Nick remarks that it's not even long enough for a credit check, Beth gasps at hearing her own words come from someone else's mouth. The couple are swept into the dancing and Nick accidentally knocks glasses over onto an electrical wire, causing a brief blackout. When the lights come back on, Beth is clinging to him. When he looks down, he notices Beth has grabbed his phone and he snatches it back, playfully pulling her into his arms to dance. An Italian man yells something at him and Beth wonders what it means. Reluctantly, Nick explains it means the hit and he got it from taking a huge hit during a college football match. Beth doesn't understand. Everyone gets hit in football, but Nick's hit was infamous. He got struck by lightning on the field, in the middle of a game. Beth thinks he's joking at first, but his expression shows she's serious and she gives him a sympathetic look. He assures her he's physically fine, aside from an issue with his peripheral vision, and she hugs him tighter, trying to comfort him. The two just sway like that for a moment, flirting with each other and are almost about to kiss when Beth's mom interrupts, calling her to cut the cake. Beth gathers the courage to go after Nick, grabbing a pair of glasses and a bottle of champagne and following him out the door. She sees a woman come up to Nick, grab him and kiss him fervently, and the two go off with each other. Beth is instantly heartbroken, feeling stupid she believed in love long enough to even try. She kicks her heels off, dipping her feet in the Fontana d'Amore as she drinks straight from the bottle, cursing the statue for making people foolishly believe in the one. She looks at the coins on the bottom of the fountain as desperate wishes for love that will never come true and picks a few up, one by one, thinking that she's saving them. As she takes the coins and one final poker chip, the owners of the coins feel a strange resonance. Nick steps outside in time to see her spinning in the fountain, suggesting the last poker chip is his. Beth scurries off into the distance to escape the police. Beth arrives home from Rome, and as she enters her apartment, she receives a call from Nick, who claims Joan gave him her number. Nick tries asking her out to dinner, a drink or coffee, but Beth turns him down flat, hanging up on him. Nick is confused because he thinks they hit it off, though he doesn't know Beth saw him with the other woman that night. Nick's friends tease him about how distracted he is, knowing that it must be a girl. Beth puts her souvenir coins in a bowl in her apartment, not thinking anything of it. Beth goes out for her usual jog in the park when she runs past an artist that seems to be drawing her. He does a double take as she breezes past and starts chasing after her as he recognizes her. Beth can't hear him yelling out since her headphones are on, so all she sees is some man chasing her, and she panics, running faster in an attempt to lose him. The man gives chase, easel in tow, till he eventually trips, falling over a carriage passing by. Beth feels bad about his fall and stops to check on him, but she's freaked out by how eagerly the man asks to see her feet. The carriage driver flips through the man's notebook, curiously noting all his drawings are of Beth. The man quickly tries to explain, introducing himself as Antonio Giuseppe Donatello, an artist from Italy who had a vision of Beth 2 days ago. Antonio saw every part of her except her feet, and he's traveled all the way to America to complete his drawings and earn Beth's love. Thoroughly weirded out and not sure what to do about the strange confession, Beth thinks he must be mistaking her for someone else and runs off. Beth sits at a cafe, trying to get some work done when suddenly, a muscly man sparks up conversation with her. It starts normally at first with small talk about the cafe, but soon the gentleman's ego takes over the conversation. He forcibly shows her his portfolio, bragging about how he's a model and introducing himself as Gail. Gail tries really hard to be cool, but it's clear he's not the sharpest tool in the shed. Unable to take the hint, Beth's not interested as he badgers her. As Gail takes his shirt off in the middle of the cafe, confessing his love for her, Beth scoops her things up and quickly skedaddles out. Beth continues on her way to the office when she bumps into a man who calls after her, telling her she dropped her watch. She collects it from him, with thanks, walking away again when he calls her back, having snatched her watch again. The man is a street magician and keeps somehow acquiring Beth's watch till she's forced to stay and take part in his trick. A crowd of onlookers gathers as the man orders Beth to pull a card, promising to show her his heart. Beth does as she's told, pulling the card and placing it back. The man does an elaborate gesture and pulls out the Joker, which isn't Beth's card but he claims is representative of him being a fool for love. He reaches into his chest and pulls a heart out, but Beth is too grossed out to stay till the end of the trick, running off to the office while the crowd is distracted. As she arrives, Stacy informs her Joan's on the phone for her, claiming it's important. Beth takes Joan's call and her sister wonders what she was doing in the Fontana d'Amore during her wedding, revealing it made front-page news in Italy. Beth admits she was drunk and picked up coins from the fountain. Umberto mentions there's a legend that if you take someone's coin from the fountain, they'll fall in love with you, but Beth shrugs it off, not believing in it. Stacy, who was listening in on her call, totally believes in it, encouraging Beth that this is her chance to find love. Beth admits a few oddballs approached her this morning, but she's more concerned with the Slater-Bradley piece than them, asking Stacy for a status report on it. Stacy proudly informs Beth she told the insurance company to shove it, after they mention wanting to hike up the rate, and Beth pales. The Slater-Bradley was being shipped from Australia. Even if they tried to ship it today, it wouldn't clear customs in time for the gala, so Beth now doesn't have a centerpiece for the Circle of Gold. She begins to panic, knowing she has to tell Celeste when she gets a call from Nick, trying to ask her out again. She tries making the excuse she doesn't have time to reject him in person. When Nick appears in front of her, he's come to her workplace. She desperately tries explaining she has bigger things to deal with, mentioning her lost centerpiece to him right as Celeste shows up, introducing Beth to their newest patron, Al Russo. Mr. Russo asks specifically to see Beth, and as they're introduced, Al recognizes Nick, mentioning Nick's hit during the game. Celeste is about to brag about Beth acquiring the Slater-Bradley to Mr. Russo when Beth interrupts her, confessing she couldn't secure it. Nick jumps in, mentioning Beth has secured something better than the Slate-Bradley, an original Petrocelli that's never been viewed. Both Celeste and Beth spin around at that. Nick explains how Damien Petrocelli gave him the only original and burned the negative since the portrait, titled Anguish, is of Nick. Nick saves Beth, making her look good in the process before Mr. Russo demands his private tour. As Beth takes Al around the museum on his tour when suddenly he presents her with a gift, a bag of sausages. Al gets uncomfortably close, flirting with her. Beth takes this as her cue to leave, but Al persistently pulls her back, confessing his love for her and chasing her around a bit before Beth manages to escape. Beth checks to see if the coast is clear before leaving work but is startled when she bumps into Nick, spraying his face in self-defense. Nick covers his eyes, groaning in pain as Beth profusely apologizes, admitting it's breath spray and she didn't know it would be so painful. Nick sobers, revealing he was just joking about the pain, and Beth, despite her best efforts, finds his sense of humor charming. Nick follows after her as Beth complains she knows his type, revealing she saw him kissing the woman at the fountain. Nick laughs, realizing that's why she's been so cold recently. He explains the woman was Umberto's crazy cousin and the blood runs hot in that family. He admits he didn't feel good about the kiss, especially after meeting Beth. Their moment is interrupted when Beth notices two of her suitors following after her and she runs off, trying to escape. Lance, the magician, has set himself up for the Great Mummy escape trick in Beth's apartment. When she arrives home, she's on the phone with Joan, trying to find out how to break the spell. Umberto explains Beth will have to return the coins to the fountain in person, but she has no time to fly to Italy just to throw some coins in a fountain. Just as she's about to ask for alternative methods, she spots Lance in her apartment and screams. He delusionally explains he's setting a record for her by doing the trick in under 3 minutes, but ends up just smashing her coffee table instead. When she spots Juan, Lance's cameraman, she loses it, kicking them both out. Nick's friend Puck teases him at work when Nick mentions he can't make it to the party on Saturday. Puck is upset, knowing his friend. He quickly realizes Nick's distracted by the museum girl. Puck insists he wants to do some recon on Beth before Nick falls any deeper for her, bringing up the point that Nick knows nothing about her. Nick's reluctant at first but eventually agrees. Beth tries going about life as usual, but at every turn, she runs into another suitor. Gail finds her while she jogs. Antonio paints nude murals of her on the side of buildings. Lance floats outside the window of her office. She drowns in a flood of flowers delivered to her work. She's stalked by a suitor at every turn. Celeste observes all this, including the change in the centerpiece for the gala, and seriously questions Beth's ability as a curator. Beth apologizes, reassuring Celeste the gala will go as planned because if it doesn't, Beth could lose her job. Puck presents the evidence he's gathered of Beth's many suitors to Nick, thinking it'll make him reconsider pursuing Beth. But Nick isn't deterred by his competition, resolving instead to up his game. Beth smiles at her phone as Nick calls, admitting she was just thinking about him and apologizing for running off the other day. She mentions the Petrocelli she needs for the gala tomorrow, but Nick quips he's wavering on that now, thinking of his own pain and suffering. He mentions he'd feel better about it if they spoke over dinner tonight, and Beth grins as she realizes he's playfully extorting her. He gets her to agree to meet at 8, and despite trying to play it cool, Beth already knows what she's going to wear to the date. Beth meets Nick at the restaurant, the Blackout. The concept of the restaurant is for customers to enjoy food without their primary sense of sight so that all their other senses become heightened. Nick confides to Beth he chose this place because their last great moment was when the lights went out in Rome, so he's hoping to pick up where they left off. Their hostess for the night, Alona, leads them to their table with her night vision goggles. The couple bump into tables and people, knocking things over before being seated. The couple try getting comfortable, making jokes about the awkward situation, but Alona hovers in the darkness, chiming into their conversation and startling them. After Alona finally leaves them alone, just as they're getting comfortable, Beth hears Al's voice, followed by Antonio, Lance, and Gail. All the suitors try pursuing her at the same time, causing chaos, and yet again, Beth is forced to run from the restaurant, crawling out on her hands and knees. Nick catches up to her as she tries to catch a taxi, wondering what happened and exactly how many men she's dating. Beth tries explaining she doesn't know them and about the spell, but she's too flustered, just wanting to leave. Nick hails a cab, asking her where would make her feel safest. The couple head to Beth's safe place, the museum. She used to think it was magical when her parents brought her as a little girl, and her father once told her the roof was made of glass so God could see the paintings from heaven. She shows him Picasso's portrait of Marie-Therese Walter, explaining how she was 17 and Picasso, already married, was 30 years her senior when they began their secret affair. Picasso would hide her initials in his paintings, eventually leaving his wife Olga for her, but later on, leaving her for another woman in the same way. Beth explains Marie would never stop loving Picasso and would end her shortly after his passing. The story makes her cry. It saddens Beth to think Marie's love was never returned as she relates to the feeling, having had terrible experiences with love in the past. She admits she's jaded now, constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop in relationships, but Nick reassures her that lightning does strike once in a while, he'd know. He convinces her what they have is real, there are no other shoes with him, and gives her a passionate kiss that starts in the museum, but ends up at his place. The couple are briefly interrupted by a knock at the door. It's Puck, trying to come over for beers with Nick, but Nick kicks him out promptly. He returns to Beth, who's found the Petrocelli and stands admiring it. Nick can't help but think about how much he lost when he looks at that photo. All his and his family's dreams were gone in an instant. Beth sympathizes, grabbing and kissing Nick to distract him. He pulls her into his lap, but when she looks up, Beth notices poker chips identical to the one she took from the Fontana, and has a horrible realization. She springs up, quickly excusing herself to leave and telling Nick this isn't going to work. Nick doesn't understand what's wrong, and Beth doesn't expect that he will, telling him only that his love isn't real. She tells him to keep the Petrocelli, explaining she doesn't want to see him in pain before she leaves, breaking his heart. While Beth and Stacy prepare for the gala, Stacy tries to reassure Beth everything will work out between her and Nick, but she doesn't believe that, convinced he's just under a spell. Beth gets a call from Joan, who spoke to Umberto's Nana and has found an alternate way to break the spell. All she has to do is return the coins to the owners. Beth's elated to hear this, feeling hopeful that her problems are solved, but Stacy has other plans, and overhearing her conversation, she steals the coins from Beth's apartment before leaving. Nick stares at the Petrocelli in contemplation. Beth answers the knock at her door, letting her 4 suitors in for a quick meeting. She sits them down and the men get excited, thinking she's going to pick one of them. Beth instead breaks it to them they're not in love with her, admitting she picked up their coins from the fountain, to much argument from the men. They don't fall silent till she blurts out that she loves someone else, confessing and realizing she loves Nick in that moment. Beth realizes she loves Nick more than her job, even if he may not truly love her back, and the men sympathize. They're all heartbroken their love won't be returned, but Al reminds them the whole point of love is to put someone else's needs before your own, theorizing maybe that's the reason they're all here, in love with Beth. Al resolves to help Beth however he can. Glad to hear this, Beth goes to grab the men's coins when she realizes they're gone, knowing it had to be Stacy. Lightning flashes, briefly taking out the lights, and Beth checks the news to find that a storm is rolling in. The men get ready to get cozy inside, but Beth insists she needs to be at the Guggenheim. Al rallies the rest of the troops and they squeeze into Antonio's tiny little car. The group hit a terrible traffic jam, and Beth urges Antonio to just drive like he's in Rome, which is dangerous advice if you've never seen how Italians drive. Antonio floors it, weaving through traffic, driving up on the sidewalk and only pausing to let Al in the front seat after he bribes Antonio with $1,000. They arrive outside the Guggenheim, but Antonio doesn't think it's close enough, driving into the building, up the elevator and onto the 5th floor. Beth swings open the doors to the gala to find the Petrocelli displayed as the centerpiece, and her coworkers excitedly running up to tell her how much of a hit the show is. She doesn't understand how it got there, and it's revealed Nick sent it over earlier in the afternoon. Celeste is pleased as well, mentioning they've received rave reviews and a record number of financial pledges. She finally acknowledges Beth's ability. Spotting Stacy, she asks for the coins. Stacy thinks she should keep them, suggesting that she's benefited a lot from having these men, especially Nick, fawn over her. But Beth believes that if she takes their love against their wills, it's not truly love at all. Nick is at a bar with Puck, who tries to take his mind off Beth, to no avail. Nick steps outside to answer a call from Beth. She thanks him for making her believe in love again. Even if it wasn't real for him, it was real for her. She promptly hangs up after her confession, leaving Nick confused. He immediately decides to run over to the Guggenheim and face her. Beth hands the coins back to their owners, one by one, each of them recalling the moment the spell made them fall for her. Lance had never been able to perform in public till he fell for her, and Al, who'd recently lost his wife, had wished to feel how he felt when she was around. Meanwhile, Nick faces many obstacles as he tries to get to Beth at the museum, ducking in fear from lightning and even getting hit by a car on the way there. Luckily, the car's driver is Puck and he gets a direct lift to the museum. When she hands Antonio his coin, he completely loses his Italian accent, confessing his name is Anthony and he's from New Jersey. He thought going to Italy would make him an artist after working 9 years in retail to survive. Beth finally returns Gail's coin, admitting she'll miss him least of all. Gail hasn't learned a thing from the ordeal either. As Beth prepares to return Nick's poker chip, Lance steals it from her with a trick and she slaps it out of his hand as she tries to get it back. The chip rolls out the door, through the halls and all the way to Nick's feet as Beth chases after it. Nick picks up the chip and Beth assumes everything is all over now that he's got his will back, and Nick finally gets to tell her how he feels. He confesses that ever since he saw her in the fountain that day, something changed in him and now he can't eat, sleep or function without thinking about her all the time. Frustrated, he rants about her delusion over the spell and tries to reiterate again to her that this is real. Beth realizes he truly loves her before he says it, reeling herself back in so he can finish. Nick confesses he's in love with her and they seal their affection with a kiss. Beth's old suitors reunite at her and Nick's wedding. Lance sees Beth before the wedding, handing her a poker chip and apologizing, realizing he must have handed her the wrong chip at the museum back then because this one isn't his. Beth feels sick as she recognizes the chip's design, believing Nick is still under the spell. Joan promptly kicks Lance out and wonders what Beth is going to do when their dad walks in. Beth walks with her father, asking for advice on how to be sure a couple will survive the long haul. He tells her not to try learning from his mistakes but to go out and make her own. She could get hurt or she could have a great romance, but she'd never know if she wasn't brave enough to try. Her father believes the passion is in the risk and there's no way to guarantee you won't get hurt by someone. Beth's father walks her up the aisle, handing her over to Nick. The ceremony begins and Father Dino begins the proceedings, asking for the members of the crowd for reasons the two should not be wed, bidding them speak now or forever hold their peace, but he seems to linger on that segment, as if hoping someone would object. As the ceremony continues, Father Dino's a bit passive-aggressive during the entire thing, and when Beth is asked if she'll take Nick for her husband, she cries, saying no. She apologizes, unable to do this to him and returning the chip before running out of the chapel. Beth bitterly argues with the statue of the Fontana d'Amore, climbing in it again when Nick finds her, questioning why she keeps handing him poker chips. Teary-eyed, Beth confesses it's because he threw it in and wished for love. She doesn't want to keep it anymore. Nick flatly reveals he did no such thing, much to Beth's confusion. She wonders who did, then quickly realizes everything with Nick is real and always has been. To prove it to her, Nick steps into the fountain, returning the coin, and at the same moment, Father Dino exclaims he's free of temptation at last. Beth suddenly remembers Nick mentioning Father Dino cleaning him out at Umberto's bachelor party, and it all makes sense. She kisses Nick deeply, finally completely sure of what's real.